Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the True Potential Do More With Your Money podcast. It is episode 55, 12th of February. I'm joined this morning by Mark Henderson, by Peter Bold, and by David Harrison. Good morning, gentlemen, and thank you for joining me today. Today's theme is all about reasons for investors' optimism. I think over the last couple of weeks, we've been running a number of Q&A sessions. So Mark and the team had an investment management Q&A session last week. The week before, it was led by Jamie, Earl and Neil, where they were talking about product side of things. And there was an underlying theme throughout all of those questions, which was really, how much better are things going to continue to improve? When should I invest again, etc. So I think there was a very optimistic air from some of the questions. So we thought we'd follow that up with today and sharing some themes and sharing some thoughts about what we see really in the coming months this year and maybe beyond from there. So that's what we'll get into in just a couple of moments' time. But Mark, if you could kick things off, please, with the week that's been so far in markets.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Good morning, everyone. We've had a good week in the markets. It hasn't been a spectacular week by way of big movement. It's been slow and steady, which has been a welcome relief, actually, after the volatility that we've seen over the last few weeks. Just to look at it, the FTSE 100's up on the week. The 250 has gone up by more this week. The US market is up. And again, the US market reflects what we've seen in the UK over the first 4 days of the week anyway, which was smaller cap stocks going up at a greater rate than the large cap. What's that meant for the portfolios is yet to date, all portfolios are up. This week only, the balanced portfolio that we look at is up by 0.8%. Over the year, it's up by 4%, and yet to date, it's 2%. So in 2021, the balanced portfolios put on 2%. The more equity-orientated portfolios, growth and aggressive, they've seen more growth in there. 3% year to date, 5% over 1 year. So we're seeing these things coming through, Dan. As I say, it's been more of a steady week than a volatile week. But those movements have reflected in the value of the True Potential portfolios. Now, if I look at what's happened in the various markets, we've had some news this morning from, economic news. The UK economy shrank by 9.9% year to date, which is hardly to be unexpected, bearing in mind what we've seen over the last 12 months. We've had some commentators talk about recession. Well, the UK's avoided that quite strongly. And we've seen 1% growth in the fourth quarter of 2020, which has helped. Looking at the UK, Britain's vaccinated more people than many other European countries, or most European countries, which raised the prospects of a strong bounce back. And the Bank of England chief economist, Andy Haldane, said it this morning in the press that it's going to bounce back like a coiled spring. So that's something to look forward to. And also in the spring, we're going to have the budget. I'm sounding like Peter Bold here with very tenuous links, Peter, but I'm going to steal this one from you as well. There's going to be a plan for jobs in the budget. So I'm looking forward to hearing that come through. Digging a little bit deeper into the economic data this week, there's one trend that's continued, and it's the non-food online sales, which has shifted to 63% in January of 2021 compared to 31% at the same time last year. So if there's been a big effect on various markets and the way that the consumer is reacting, that figure gives it there. And it's a result of what we've seen in the last 12 months, primarily driven by the COVID restrictions. Moving across the Atlantic, US Senate passed a reconciliation bill, moving forward with a $1.9 trillion support package without the help of the Republican Party. And we're seeing signs of the job market improving in the US. The numbers filing for support for the first time in the last week has fallen. And also that goes from the employed into the self-employed and the contractors market there. where we've got the pandemic unemployment assistance scheme in place. Inflation missed the target in the US. I know it sounds strange to say that inflation came in at a lower figure than it was anticipated. Some people say that that's not so good news, but I was brought up in a time when inflation was definitely bad news. But at 1.4% in the US, they were forecasting 1.5, so it was just slightly below there. We've seen an executive order signed by Joe Biden as well, one of a few that he's done. This is for the car industry because it's still suffering from the lack of semiconductors. And what he's looking to do is look at the direct supply chain review, because the motor industry is slowing down because of the lack of semiconductors. The other thing that's happened in the US overnight is that there's been a deal for another 100 million additional vaccines from both Pfizer and Moderna, and both companies will speed up the delivery of existing orders. So again, that looks good for the US economy and the chance to open up further. One point as well, Peter, if we're looking at the US, Mackenzie Scott has made the biggest charitable donation of $6 billion. So she has now become one of the biggest charitable donors on the planet. What's happening in Europe? Well, we've got Mario Draghi's coalition helping Italian bond yields come down. The hope that they'll stabilize the Italian government and be able to help things through there. Perhaps we might get an Italian government that's got more of a shelf life than previous. It might last over a year, who knows? And in Germany, we've got some lagging data, but exports are up year on year in December, which is good. The services side, however, in Europe still remains relatively weak, and that's because of COVID restrictions. However, a huge positive in Europe is that the IPO market is very, very active. This year so far, we've seen 16 deals, around about 8.4 billion of new money being invested. That's in euro terms, and that's the highest since 1998. Moving across to the Far East, it's been relatively quiet over there because the Chinese market's been closed because of the Lunar New Year. But some data did come up to say that Chinese car sales in January were 34% up year on year, with 2.5 million vehicles sold in January. So there's real signs of recovery coming through there. And it'll be interesting when we get further figures on the Chinese market, just to see how many of those vehicles were electric vehicles. China being the biggest market for that on the planet. Finally, Peter, I'm just going to look very briefly at currency markets. I keep saying Peter, sorry, Dan, it was your question. I've just Peter's at the biggest part of the screen there.
Good, biggest head.
and Dan's on mute as well, yes, which makes it even funnier.
You see, you're putting a lot of pressure on Peter today, Mark.
Yeah, I'm used to him hosting, Dan, so
I was having to think of some questions for you there, Mark. I thought I've got no idea what he's talking about, but I better start pretending I do.
Because I did think when you told Peter about the largest charitable donation, I thought you were throwing the goal at Peter to match it.
Well, where's my checkbook?
I think we need to help Greg with his running to get more people adding to it. I saw he's over £1,000 earlier in the week. Last point on markets is the currency movements. Sterling strengthened 138. It's come back a wee bit this morning, just above 137. And pound euro versus euro is at 114. Unfortunately, though, we can't take advantage of those rates because we can't travel to either Europe or the US because we're in lockdown. So that's
I was worried. I was really worried there because you've had several minutes of optimism from your mom, but you managed to finish on a pessimistic note. And I think
I'm not finished, David.
Oh, not finished. Oh no. Right, sorry.
So if you were depressed by that, here will come some more.
And that's from a man who's had his heating fixed this morning. You should be very happy.
It might not be fixed yet. He's given me a checklist of things to try all day, which is like, oh no.
Right, switch it on.
Yeah, that'll be a good start.
Yeah, so coming back to where I started, the portfolios are all up this week. They're on both equity markets there across the globe, and again, the the fact that the smaller companies had moved higher on the first 4 days is another reason why active management and the choice that we give within the portfolios is important going forward.
Thank you very much, Mark. So, Peter, what do you think about all of that?
I think it sounded great.
It sounded great. But
a couple of things Mark mentioned there that I would just pick up on. You mentioned the budget, Mark, on the 3rd of March. There's something happens before that, which happens a week, not this week coming, but the one after. I don't quite know the exact day of the week, but it'll be sometime the week after next, which is Boris is going to set out, are you ready for this? A roadmap to recovery. Remember that phrase? You'll hear a lot of it in the next 10 days. A roadmap to recovery. I don't know whether he's using like an A to Z or whether it's like a sat nav these days, whether it'll say like just, turn right, for example, because there's been a lot of turning other directions over the last year. But anyway, that's happening not the next week, but the one after. And then that sets up for the budget, which I assume then is the week after that on the 3rd of March. So a little, I mean, I could be wrong on this, but I made a few predictions last year, all of which came right. I'll just hasten to add. But anyway, might as well try and break that spell. I don't think he will, Rishi Sunak. I mean, I don't think he will hike up business taxes. There's a lot of talk in the paper that he's going to do that. And I think partly because there's a lot of talk in the paper, but if you think about what you said there, Mark, about it being a plan for jobs, I think there might be some reductions in business tax. I could well be wrong on that one. I'll happily come back on any tumble pie if I am, but it's the kind of little political trick to let the expectation roll up that it's going to be a bad one for business, and then bang, it's actually quite a good one, or at least a decent one, shrouded with a few of the kicks hidden well down the back. So I don't know, it might be all right, but that's coming up over the next couple of weeks.
So do you think some of that will get trailered, Peter, during the roadmap to recovery?
I think what the roadmap is, I'm sorry for using the jargon, it's the fact that we're saying it just proves how silly it is that we've adopted it immediately. I think, bearing in mind that that's the Chancellor's set piece, and everyone in political circles knows that Rishi's got his eye on an even more senior job, and I think there's only really one. That's his moment. So if you're Boris, you probably think, well, I'd like to have a moment before that, Rishi, which is, I think, where he sets out roadmaps, and which will, by the way, not just be about the economy. It'll be about when our school's going back. Is it going to be the 8th of March or what? Or he's going to want his moment. Next week we're meant to be hitting this 15 million of vaccinations that he set the target. Looks like we are. I think we are on course, which is quite miraculous, really. So I think it's his moment to say, take a bit of credit for that, or just acknowledge that it's happened. Talk about the schools going back. Talk about what the next 6 months looks like. But we've got to move on from this constantly being in lockdown and nothing happening. So he really has a big job, Boris. If you put the political show to the side and just forget all that for a second, he does have an important job, which is to really lead us as a country out of this and to something far more optimistic, dare I say it.
Good. Thanks, Peter. So, David, are you optimistic?
I'm always optimistic, and I think, Danny, there are no reasons at all, I think, right now to be pessimistic about our chances individually and as a nation. You just see the year that we've come through, and so you probably couldn't get more things thrown in there. So you've got genuinely a pandemic. So that was a real thing. Certainly, I've got a real vaccination yesterday because I've got a really sore arm. So that's factually. You have the situation with Trump. You had a situation with Brexit. All of those things, which are major things. When you look back in history, these would have been a defining moment for a generation. Not for us. This is just part and parcel of what's the future will look like. All the volatility that Mark mentioned there, it's become normal. I was discussing it with Jeff Casson the other day. I mentioned it, this sort of volatility, which I actually love. I think this is always an opportunity. When you've got volatility, when you get shocks, when you've got all of that going on, it sorts things out. So, you know, the biggest negative part of British life is the media. Okay, so you know, it doesn't matter how many good things come in a day. And we heard Mark earlier mention all of these things, which are either neutral or very positive, right? I've no doubt that Jon Snow would have something. Oh, let's get the country file people in it. You know, they're people who should really listen to about Brexit and about wokeism and all the rest of it. Comes in, you know, I couldn't think of a bunch of people less suited to tell me on a Sunday night what's going on in society than a bunch of farmers and people with green fingers and green faces. You know, if they just stick to what I want to see pictures of nature and people wandering around in it and things like that. I don't want an opinion, which we got a few weeks ago about a walking group or a walking group rather than a walking group. You know, that all of that has been chucked at us in 1 year, and look where we are. The future, I don't think, has ever been better. When you think of what is, you know, at our fingertips now, even the one thing that was kind of negative but dressed up as a positive in Mark's response, and it's positive in one way, was the amount of IPOs being done in Europe. They've gone to Europe temporarily because the Europeans are playing a sneaky game, as we would know they would do. There's nothing sneaky about Europeans apart from the fact you've got like the Germans involved and the French and things like this. They've never been sneaky in their history before, as we know. They've always been very, very straightforward, French especially. And Mario Draghi, I thought that was a kind of one of those Xbox games or whatever, but it's not. That's the other Mario. But that being one of those games for me lasts longer than an Italian government. But when you look at those things, those IPOs are going there because in London right now we don't have this equivalence going on. So we're getting things which would have gone to London going to Amsterdam, I think in particular. So that will come back. Same as somebody who's crying, complaining. I see we've got what's going on this week. I know. I better order some flowers because there's something to do. Somebody commemorated a massacre in Chicago early in the year, and they've turned it into a thing where you give your wife flowers. Why? You know, after some poor gangsters got killed in Chicago, you know, then they commemorate it with flowers. I don't know. Somebody called Valentine got shot. Anyway, they were saying, the flowers are costing more money because of Brexit. I thought, oh, kidding, you know, whoa, we went almost a whole half an hour without somebody still, Brexit, it's the worst thing that's ever happened to us. It's the best thing that's ever happened to you, you dope, because it strips away some of the bureaucracy that hides the individuals in society. Which
what I liked about that, David, I think I wasn't going to get on this today, but you made a great point there. The Brexit and the vaccine side of things, and true colours were shown pretty quickly, weren't they, when it came to them stamping their feet because they made a mess of ordering their own vaccines. So instantly they try and close the Irish border, like classic bullying instantly. And I was actually, you know, I've talked before about, you know, the fact that I'd voted to remain, but the more that the posturing and the nonsense went on, I did actually start to think, I'm glad that we're leaving now, and that just actually proved it as well. You know, with that.
As soon as you get rid of politicians, you begin to let people see what's underneath. It would be wrong to think Europe is Ursula von der Leyen, right? Or that other big long drip of a bloke who was in charge of Barnier, who was in charge of just thwarting our efforts, right? I would never ever join a club where it was harder to get out of, where there was a penalty to leave. And as I was leaving, what they were doing was really, really being nasty with us. You know, I'd overpaid my dues and they make me pay, wait years to get my money back and call me bad names and all the rest of it on the way out. I wouldn't join that club. Others won't join that club, right? This is a club where you're coerced to stay in. You are forced to stay in. That can't be a good thing. So even as you'd said earlier, you know, I know some people on this call voted to stay in. Some people on this call didn't vote at all. Others would have chosen to come out. That's the individual making a choice. That's the thing about the Brexit vote. There was no tribes involved. A bunch of people running around with a red bus, and a bunch of people running around, you know, I don't know what the Liberals were doing. I don't even know what that woman, I think she'd lost her mind. Some, you know, the lunatic wandering around in charge of the Liberal Party, and you had the Labour Party not knowing, just wandering around trying to work out which way the vote was going, so they could then jump in afterwards, just at the last minute, and say, we support you because you're going to vote in that direction. So we whether we like it or not, we've come out. Whether we like it or not, we're on our own. Yes, the negativism about fishing. Come on, you can't be any worse off than you were, you fishermen. It's 0.01% of the GDP or whatever it is, the economy, sorry, of this country. It's neither here nor there. Of course, we're going to need foreign trawlers and all the rest of it to get fish. There's no fishing industry. That's not the fault of coming out of Brexit. Come on, it's because of Brexit. Mm-hmm. It's because of the European Union. It's because the Spanish and the French made the most of it and invested in fishing. So, you know, the change that's been made is to come out. Well, build on that. You know, get sailing up, buy a bigger boat. You know, buy a bigger boat, get up to Iceland, catch some fish up there. I don't know. I mean, the biggest trawler in the northeast, you know, northern waters there is from Holland. How can that be? You know, they just sail around in canals normally, you know, but the Dutch have felt bold enough to come out of their little canals, take the tulips out of the boat and start and catch fish. It's but the thing about the St. Valentine's Day was that somebody's going, you know, we're having to pay a tariff on this stuff which we didn't pay before. And where did it come from? Colombia. You think, right, well, just pop down to Bogota. We'll get round to that sooner or later, but let's pop down to Bogota and do a trade deal. You know, they're pretty good at trading things. They're good at growing plants down there, as well as they are the second largest producers of flowers in the world. You know, so yes, you'll get more and more and more. You can get tulips, not from Amsterdam, but from Bogota Dam. You know, you can, or anywhere in Colombia, just anywhere up and down that chain of the Andes, you can get any kind of flowers that you want. You'll get more and more and more of them, and they'll be cheaper, right? Even though they'll come across the Atlantic. And as we know from a previous life, it's 21 days is what you need from cut to shelves in Tesco's or M&S, because they're not just any flowers. These are flowers which in the past, because they had M&S on it, were far, far too expensive. And now, because you can get them via the internet, are much, much cheaper. Much cheaper. So an advert for flowers last night for a company called Serenata, you know, which I thought was a disease, but it's not. It's the name of a flower company, and apparently you can get them put through your letterbox.
Yeah, that's the new thing now. You get your flowers delivered flat and they pop up. That's Jem said some from a company called Bloom and Wild.
Bloom and Wild, what a great name. Bloom in hell. You know? I've got
do the squirt water as well?
Blooming Gardens.
Yeah. That's it. Steve Hutton has a flower that squirts water like that, Peter.
Flat flowers through your letterbox and pop up and squirt water. Come on. I mean, imagine giving that to the wife. Go on, bang, hit her in the face.
What a great idea. I know one of the things to be optimistic would be Rishi Sunak. I hope that Rishi learns not to tax things which are successful. Okay, so that's the point. If you tax something which is successful, it's a disincentive to be successful. So if you tax online companies because high street companies have suffered because of business rates, there's an example there. You've cut business rates in the pandemic, everybody feels better off. Fine. What do business rates go for? A bit of it goes to government, a bit of it goes to council chambers for huge monstrosities of local parliaments to sit in and stuff like that. Fine. Will we lose anything out of not having any business rates? Doubtful. Will we lose anything by not having shops in high streets? Probably yes, you'll lose the heart of your town. But that problem started years ago. It's nothing to do with the internet. Don't get the things mixed up. Don't get the cause of this demise mixed up with the internet. Right? This is just the latest thing. If you hadn't badly damaged the high streets by pedestrianising them, by almost making people feel guilty for getting in a motor car, for all of the things that have created the wealth in this world, which is unprecedented, we are better off than we've ever been by a long, long way, and that's fairly recent. Let's not stop that because of wokeism or other stuff would be my big reason to be optimistic, Daniel.
And thanks, David. And Peter, we'll finish up with vaccines with you. I think another reason to be optimistic when we look at the UK side of things has been the British government's vaccination programme and aiming towards this target of 15 million by the next couple of days.
That's right, yeah. And I think I read today that Wales has reached its bit of that target. It's there now. It's been the absolute success, and the last 12 months has been one step forward, 2 steps back. Stop start, absolutely, and they've been rightly criticised for that. We've got this bit right, massively right. I think I read that Israel and was it some of the UAE, maybe have done well as well. But apart from that, we are absolutely out there, miles ahead. And it's only a few weeks ago when they chose to delay the second dose of some of these vaccines that was, well, we're making a big mistake there. But actually now people seem to think that is probably the right thing. You can stretch it out, you can get more people done, and I think it's right. I think and maybe it was on a podcast or just some of our calls last month, that the thing that I think was really they had to sort out was the daily the deaths figures, because there were terrible numbers and all that. And of course, this is starting to do that. I think I saw 2 days ago there was 1,000. Yesterday there was 600 and a bit, and that is dropping very. If you look at the graphs, it is now beginning to come down very, very quickly. And so, it's been a success. There's a lot more to do. I think we've just got to say that's why I think next week or the week after next, when he sets out the next plan, he's got to be equally optimistic, as David was just talking about there, and really just get everybody fired up. As Andy Haldane, you mentioned it, Mark said, we're going to bounce back like a coiled spring, apparently. But if we just leave the kind of hyperbole in the language back to 1 second, he also said in that article there's 250 billion pounds of people's money saved up because no one's been spending anything. It's all sitting there waiting to be spent. Well, that's great. We know everything. That is all great news. As I say, we've got the vaccine. The money's there to be spent. People are desperate to just get out and do anything, whether it's a holiday and all the rest of it. I noticed one of the Tory MPs, a grandee, a guy called Sir Charles Walker, very critical last night on the news of the government and saying, got to stop these talking about 10 years in jail if somebody comes back from a holiday and tells a fib, a 19-year-old, or we're really going to lock them up for 10 years. Let's get away from that kind of stuff.
No.
Focus on the positives that you just pointed out there. People have got demand that's pent up. There's 250 billion waiting to be spent. The vaccine's working tremendously well. Come on, we can get on with this now.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. And Mark, with obviously what Peter's saying, in terms of the almost pent up demand where money's being saved, with as you mentioned in the introduction, we've had probably the steadiest week we've had for a long time in markets as well. Are we going to see further growth this year in terms of investor optimism?
Dan, I think so. I mean, we've got saving rates at record highs, as we've said, for obvious reasons. If people can't spend, the money's coming in, sometimes at a slower rate, but money's coming in. So there is this pent-up demand. And, you know, the global economy's in recovery mode. And I know you said that we're going to have the final word on vaccines, but I think it's important, Dan. The reason for optimism for me when we're thinking about it is we're not this time last year. You know, if you look back 12 months to where we were entering into a pandemic. It was an unknown. And the response, the global response, a coordinated response from both governments, central banks, but most importantly from the private sector, has been crucial here. It's been a time of transformation. It's been a time of innovation, and record numbers of vaccines have been produced in record time. So that's what's going to lead us out, that the global economy will continue to improve. And there's lots of areas for optimism within the markets. You know, we've said before, interest rates are at a record low. So keeping money in cash isn't an option for medium to longer term investors. It has to be asset backed. And this is a mantra that we've had going back to the start of True Potential and beyond, where we knew what we wanted to do, which was to have investment funds which were diversified across the globe. We have multi-asset funds, we have portfolios, and we take an impartial approach for investors. And we've got to look through all of this. I'm not saying that there's either rose-tinted glasses or undue pessimism. We've just got to be impartial and take in all of the news that we're getting, all of the research that we're getting, and plan the portfolios accordingly. And a point on the media, this is, you know, I know that we knock the media, and here's an example. Just this week, we're watching the news at home, and Matthew came in, and he just sat and he said, "What's going on here? This sounds optimistic. What is it?" And I'll tell you what it was. We were watching ITV News, not BBC. And that was the difference. They led with a positive story about vaccinations, about how the UK was reacting. And last night, it was back to the BBC. There was a good news story hidden. You had to wait about 15 minutes for it to come out. And it was a mixture of the great news on the falling death rates, the hospitalizations are lower, the vaccinations moving a lot forward quicker in the UK. And there's the other thing that there's other drugs as well coming, which are helping the COVID situation. So, right, yeah.
Colombia's helping with that. I mean, that the Colombians are doing their best to bring drugs to our country. So, you know, the future is extremely bright, Mark. I think you're right. I just want to touch on that Daniel, building on what Mark has just said there. When you get the kind of shocks that we've had, right? A year ago, look where we were. Well, we didn't know where we were, did we? It could be in a year's time we're looking back and going, bloody hell, we hadn't realised how bad it was going to be in February 2021. Okay, we didn't realise how bad it was going to be in 2020. We don't know, and I think this is the point. This is where businesses go wrong, where stock markets go wrong, where politicians in particular go wrong, is predicting the future too far ahead. Okay, the other area where you go wrong is that we deny the facts. You know, most people have you believe there's never been a worse time. Factually, right, there has never been in the history of mankind a better time to be alive. There are fewer people in poverty. So there's an entire program last night spent on what's going wrong with Britain. Look at food banks. And, you know, there's no denying that food banks have grown. And a lot of the food banks are actually fueled by, not through charitable donations, but by the overspill from a Tesco's or an Aldi's or something out where they're going around the back, getting the food, which is past its shelf life, you know. So there's a great thing there. I mean, why was it thrown away in any case? You know, it's that food's okay, isn't it? It's maybe not okay for the paying people at the front end, but around the back end, you're giving it out to people who are eating it. That food's okay. So what do we learn from it? I don't know what I learned from it, by the way. I just learned, here's another attempt to get me to think what a horrible place Britain is, right? But I'd experienced something earlier in the day. I got my my Pfizer, I think that's how you say it, vaccine, which is a posh vaccine, by the way. This is the one I think my vaccine is better than the kind of vaccine that you younger people get, your AstraZeneca, made on the cheap British one. I've gone for the deluxe one. It must be deluxe because you've got to keep it frozen and hidden away in fridges. So I think, and also I've got to wait 12 weeks before I get the second one of those. So it's worth waiting for. But
David, is that a hole in your jumper on the side? Did you not even take your jumper off, or did you just have it straight through?
Get in.
Straight through your jumper.
That's it. And back up. And I can keep this on. Apparently I've got to keep this on for 12 weeks and go back and get in, you know. And I was given the choice as an individual, do you want the right arm or the left arm? And, you know, but it couldn't have been easier, right? I had the choice. I could have gone to Centre of Life, but that was inconvenient for us because it was on an evening. Or I went to Hexham Primary Care Centre, which I've been before, and they gave me raging diarrhea because they give us a drip with antibiotics or something in it, when actually I didn't need antibiotics. So I didn't want to go back in there again, but I went back in, and I think they're kind of volunteers and things. Everybody just behaved themselves. Everybody washing their hands, doing all that, masks on. You know, I went a little bit early. I didn't go an hour early and stand like a fool, like some fool in an EasyJet queue. You know, like get first. You know, none of that nonsense. People were actually waiting around outside in the car park and looking at the watches and then going in. So I walked the distance of about 30 yards from the car, went in, and I was out within. You had to wait for 15 minutes. They'll give you a little timer, right? You get like a little timer, which you can take home. If you don't,
like an egg timer, like a little egg timer thing.
Yes, like a little egg timer, but it was an electronic thing, Peter. Because
an exit timer.
Oh yes, very good. So, but it was blue, and the lady gave it to us. She even cracked a joke. So she spoilt my day because I was going to ask for a lollipop, and she said, but she gave us a little sticker instead. So I've got a little sticker to say, but I've lost it. They didn't stick it somewhere. It's knocking around somewhere, but to say I've got this thing. I feel great. You know, I now should go out and be like people in the Tyne Valley, instead of greeting everybody, you know, and whatever, just lick each other like that. So pass the virus on. That's what was happening in some of the villages around here. That's the only thing. Either that or they all live in one big house.
You'll have to give it 3. You'll have to give it 3 weeks though, David, before you can go and lick anybody. I was going to pick you up on this actually. I'm glad you brought it up because you mentioned earlier on about bureaucracy when you were talking about the EU. But isn't it funny how on the vaccination thing, I've heard a few people say that it's really slick. You're in, you know, you get it done. There's no messing about. You do your 15 minutes off, in and out. Whereas because that system has been thrown together quite quickly, it hasn't had time to grow all sorts of legs and arms and bits on top and layers. It just happens. Compare that with other parts of, dare I say it, healthcare, where there's so many layers of management and bureaucracy that nothing happens quickly. It's quite interesting that is a brilliant success, and it works like that.
Straight away. No, and I mean, the finding of the vaccine things, which we were told take 10 years or 5 years, I don't know what, a long time anyway to bring about these vaccines. Well, we've got loads of them, you know. I know I sound a bit like Boris Johnson, but only if you stretch it to an incredulous length, in terms of just, you know, vague definitions of the situation. But what you have are a large number now of vaccines, and the way that they're producing them, the pandemic, if you like to use that word, has brought that about. If we learn those lessons, if we learn the lesson that we don't necessarily know anything right now, but we can learn pretty quickly. Private companies found the vaccine once we got the bureaucrats out of the way. The only thing that's ever gone wrong in this last 12 months is when we've been bureaucratic in our response, when we've been slow to act, when we've shut down the avenues to the politicians that can be seen. If politicians were to see what I saw yesterday, which is what I say every day, there's people minding their own business, you know, not telling other people what to do, not pointing, not doing anything. The British public are the British public. They're not great, they're not bad, they are the British public, right? They know what's going on. They don't need to be patted on the top of the head. They don't, right, 10-year jail sentence for what? Howie, you know, which idiot politician dreamt that up? I don't know. Any politician would do. You talk about being hysterical. You're going to send somebody 10 years for what? Is that for being 9 days in quarantine? What about 8 days and then they nick off? What about 7 days? What, you idiots? You're just showing how ill-advised anybody was to ever put you in government when you came out with that kind of thing. Vaccination.
Mark, I've got a question. You know, they're talking about not being able to go abroad on holiday this year, so everyone's meant to be looking to book holidays locally. Do you know any hotels, you know, I don't know, within say 20 miles or so of where you are that might have any good offers on, like, especially if you're a key worker, you know, you maybe get a discount on the golf or something? Do you know any of those?
I think, Peter, there is one I have in mind. It's going to have the Grand Chaps room opening up quite shortly, because he's encouraging people not to do anything, I believe. So there's another loose lips sink hotels.
Well, they've got a few in government at the moment, isn't it? Like, what they could do with is just like what we have. We've got like a thing called a business plan, you know, and we've got like a boss called Daniel, and we have like this thing. It's not like a big thing. We just think, are we going to say something to anybody? Yes, get Dan to say it. Or if we get Mark to say it, because we don't want them to have too much good news, it's still the same. It's still the same news, but just just a little bit of. But if you think that's bad, it could be worse. But it's really good kind of tone. But it's not like buy today. No, buy tomorrow. No, buy today. No, buy next week. Or buy yesterday. They're not different signals. Grant Shapps. What? Why? What's it got to do with him? You know, we all know, Grant, we're not going to allow you to make any decisions, right? That's it. You know, you don't know if you're coming or going, which is bad for transport. If the transport minister doesn't know if he's coming or going, right? Yes, I do know of a hotel which will be open for business. There will be no special deals for key workers, because everybody, I believe, is a key worker. All lives matter, right? All workers matter. Public workers, private workers, everybody counts. Your money's the same. All are welcome. If you can pay the price, you'll have the best time in the world, in Britain. And it's a great place to go on holiday in Northumberland. Right? You just don't want 2 weeks there, right? You want a week and then a few days to get the hypothermia over with. What it is, but where I live, you've got the River North Tyne, and you've got Chollerford Bridge there, and I see people walking down there to go swimming, you know, wild swimming. And there was a program a couple of weeks ago with Robson Green, that well-known pop star, walking the wall, you know, which you think, oh, great, you know, we'll see some things here. We just saw his big silly face, and he's like weirdest accent in the world, you know, you don't know where he's from, including he doesn't know where he's from, because at 1 minute he was from Hexham, next minute he was from Wallsend, next minute he was talking to somebody, saying, hello, I'm Robson Green, and I looked at him as if he was a big pervert, going, what? There's like two girls going, oh, who's he? Keep back, you know. And only somebody who's like mad would think it would be interesting looking at him, when all I wanted to do was look on the views and things, this beautiful countryside. And he's saying, It's terrible. I'm going for a walk in this beautiful countryside and I can't say anything. You think, well, that's the thing about filming. You know, it's up to you. If you can't see anything, the last thing we want to see is you for 3 episodes. You know, there's a few little things where he's walking into the sunset that was quite good. But yeah, he's a bit like Alan Partridge, I would have thought.
Let's hope for Robson's sake we don't have the Jackie Charlton effect.
And I think on that note, Mark, or on that bombshell, as Alan Partridge would say, I think we'll wrap it up now.
That's a Jeremy Clarkson. I don't want to be Jeremy Clarkson anyway. You could be Robson, because people go Robson Green and go, okay, what's your first name though? You know, there's something wrong with somebody who calls somebody like a surname. Like, it's like, my name's Harrison David. All right. Well, what's your first name? Just call him like Billy. You know, something like that. But Jeremy Clarkson, at least he's got a first name. So does Alan Partridge. He's got a bird's name though, isn't he? Partridge. And he lives in a pear tree.
He once pitched a show called A Partridge Amongst the Pigeons. But that's it. It's a total topic for another day. We talk Alan Partridge nonsense all day, but we'll not. So yeah. We'll wrap up. So I think lots of reasons to be optimistic. Lots of reasons to watch Alan Partridge this weekend. That would be something to look forward to instead of Valentine's Day. That could be more fun. So David, Mark, Peter, thank you very much for everything today. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you as well. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you've picked up some reasons to be optimistic, picked up some smiles along the way as well. Have a lovely weekend, everybody, and I very much look forward to speaking to you next week. Cheers for now. Bye-bye. Subscribing to True Potential YouTube channel is quick and easy. Simply go to your YouTube app on your phone, type in True Potential and press the red subscribe option. You'll then be notified as and when new videos are released.